some exciting news on the energy front, and we've got a number of folks here that are going to talk about it. It's actually pretty comprehensive. Today, I signed an administrative order creating the Office of Energy Innovation, and so people may ask why. Well, Alaska is an energy giant, but in all of its forms. So, historically, we've talked about oil and gas and to an extent coal, but we have tremendous energy opportunities here in the state of Alaska, including wind, solar, hydro, tidal, geothermal, micronuclear, and hydrogen, and probably more to be discovered. So the Office of Energy Innovation will coordinate this pursuit of energy that is sustainable, dependable, and affordable. And so we're going to talk about some exciting developments. For example, EVs, the Alaska Energy Authority EV charging station plan has been approved. And we're going to have Curtis talk about that here in just a moment. And then micronuclear. This week, the RFP for a micronuclear reactor was issued by the U.S. Air Force to be tested at Eielson Air Force Base. We'll be talking about that as well. So Alaska will become a proving ground for this technology. And obviously, the small nuke technology has the real potential to displace diesel-generated power in many of our isolated communities. The applications for our remote resource development plays as well. Transmission. Last May at the First Alaska Sustainable Energy Conference, AEA and the Rail Belt Utilities announced plans to upgrade and reinforce the transmission line between Homer and Fairbanks. This will allow Bradley Lake expansion and integration of more renewable sources. We talk about renewables. Alaska already produces about 30% of utility-scale power from renewable resources. Tidal, new technologies such as tidal are being studied in Alaska in partnership between the public and private sectors. Cook Inlet's tides represent nearly 1/5 of the world's identified total energy potential. And then CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We have immense potential here in the state of Alaska. 50 gigatons of carbon storage capacity in Cook Inlet alone, and much more of it on the North Slope. Of course, our critical minerals are going to play a role. We have nearly every one of the 50 critical minerals identified as necessary to both the energy transition and our national security by ending our reliance on foreign imports for materials like cobalt, graphite, and rare earths. And the AK LNG project. Multiple positive impacts: cheaper gas for Alaskans, better air quality for Fairbanks, and thousands of jobs and economic activity. 77 million tons of reduced carbon emissions would be part of this, and it's going to allow a path to blue and green hydrogen as well. So as we can see, Alaska has it all. This is an exciting time for energy, and we are positioned to take advantage of it. So the Office of Energy Innovation will make sure we don't miss any opportunities at all. With that, I'm going to turn it over to AEA Executive Director Curtis Thayer with some more details. Curtis?
Thank you, Governor.
Sorry, Curtis.
That's what everybody has to do. Thank you, Governor. It's an exciting time for energy sector, especially here in Alaska. And deploying clean energy solutions in our state is well underway. This administrative order builds and reaffirms the work the state of Alaska has already undertaken with our partners here today and will contribute to economic growth and job creation. And as we accelerate transition to a clean energy economy. The state's energy office at AEA is committed to ensuring that all Alaskans have access to safe, reliable, and affordable energy. All across Alaska, the Alaska Energy Authority is developing and implementing clean energy solutions, targeting goals for energy efficiency, energy security, reducing the cost of energy, carbon emissions, and investment in clean energy resources and in infrastructure. And today, I'd like to share with you a few of those updates. Today, we have the Bradley Lake Management Committee, and they approved to be advanced to the AEA board next month a bond for $175 million for transmission upgrades from Bradley up north towards Anchorage. The interesting thing with this is there is no additional cost to ratepayers, and there is no burden to the state treasury. This is when we paid off the Bradley bonds in the last 2 years, and there's excess payments for that. And that's what we're pledging to do, not only transmission upgrades, but look at battery storage on this segment. This transmission upgrades will reduce the constraints and improve the Kenai Peninsula's transmission capacity to export power out of Bradley and allow for additional renewable energy generation. And I think it's important to note 17% of Bradley Power goes to Fairbanks. So it is truly a solution for the rail belt. Everybody benefits from Homer all the way to Fairbanks. And our board will take this under consideration on October 22nd. Hydroelectric studies are underway. As we look at improving transmission lines, we also look to how we can improve the performance of Bradley Lake. It supplies 10% of the rail belt, or roughly 54,000 homes. And after a successful West Fork Upper Battle Creek diversion, where a creek was diverted into Bradley Lake, we're now looking at what we call the Dixon diversion, and looking to do the studies to find out, does this increase, and can we divert more water towards Bradley and additional generation? And that potentially can electrify 14 to 28,000 homes. So that's just the next step. As the governor mentioned, the Alaska Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Plan was approved by the federal government. There's $52 million of formula funding available to Alaska, and the first step was getting an approval. We had 60 days to do it. The team worked very hard across the board with many partners throughout the state. And with that approval comes $19 million in this first funding level. And then, like I said, then it will be over $52 million over the next 5 years. We talk about statewide grid resilience and reliability. There's $60 million available in the infrastructure bill that hopes to limit the weather extremes and remind us how reliable energy infrastructure is. And we're seeking to maximize those IIJA funding and prioritize projects that increase grid resilience against disruptive events. And this money is tied directly to transmission, whether it's transmission in the rail belt, transmission in Southeast Alaska, transmission out in the Copper Valley. So we'll be looking at that holistically with that. The first set of funds is $12.1 million, and then the second is another $12.1 until they hit $60 million. So another large infrastructure project. Another exciting development, I'm actually going to leave it for John Burns, but AEA continues to leverage partnerships wherever possible across the state, and we were able to leverage our relationship on a large grant opportunity to benefit Golden Valley and the military. And I'll let John, again, talk about that. Another item is Renewable Energy Fund. In the last year, the governor, with the governor's leadership and the legislature, $20 million is put towards renewable energy. That has now funded 38 projects across the state. Over 80% of those projects are in rural Alaska, but a couple of the projects are here on the rail belt. They include looking at wind studies for Fairbanks, looking at wind studies down in Homer, looking at the Dixon diversion. So there's a great mix of projects that funding is doing, and we should have all that money deployed and on the street working with the various communities that applied for it by the end of this month, which is literally today. That was our goal. And then we also have a power project fund. We did fund the largest solar farm in Alaska, which was Willow. The same creators of that solar farm now look to want to expand that times 8. And they've come to AEA to look at funding that. And we're going to be taking that on our October 26th agenda with our board also to look at approving a loan for that. So we continue this investment of independent power producers and being able to sell into the utilities and helping them provide that financing to get to that point. With all that said, I do want to recognize the Railbelt utility partners for being here today. We have Chugach Electric and Arthur Miller, Golden Valley, John Burns, Homer Electric, Brad Jarneski, Brad right there, Matanuska Electric with Tony Izzo, and the City of Seward by Rob Montgomery. Collectively, we've been working to upgrade and improve Bradley Lake generation and operations and add renewables to the rail belt for 550,000 Alaskans. And here to say a few words, I would like to invite John Burns up, followed by John Burns, who is the president and CEO of Golden Valley Electric, followed by Tony Izzo, the CEO of the Matanuska Electric Association. Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks, Governor, for having us here. Each of us that are here today, and I think everybody within the state, understands that having safe, reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy is critical to Alaska's economic viability now and into the future. No one knows that better than the utilities who have the responsibility of serving the businesses and residents of this great state, and especially the 5 railbelt utilities who are here before you today, who have the privilege and the fiduciary responsibility of providing electricity to nearly 70% of the state's population that resides from Homer to Delta Junction. There are exciting developments that are happening on the rail belt as we speak. You heard a few of those, but let me share with you. The rail belt is focused on achieving a cleaner energy future. Recently, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska approved the Rail Belt Reliability Council as the electric reliability organization for the rail belt. The Homer Electric Association installed a 93 megawatt hour battery. Matanuska Electric Association, and you just heard from Curtis, entered into a power purchase agreement for 8.5 megawatts of solar. Chugach Electric is coordinating with other railbelt utilities to evaluate and implement large-scale wind into the entire railbelt system. And at Golden Valley, we just adopted a strategic generation plan that will result in the closure of a 60-megawatt coal-fired plant in 2024, implementation and integration of large-scale wind, and a large battery that will replace what at one time had been the world's largest battery. Additionally, thanks to DNR's efforts, the state recently eliminated what had effectively been a wind tax that was imposed on wind projects constructed on state land. And most recently, as Curtis mentioned, the Alaska Energy Authority and TVA were awarded a grant from the Department of Defense for a 34-mile expansion of distribution line along the Richardson Highway from Delta Junction to the military's Black Rapids training site. This line extension will enable Black Rapids to transition from diesel generation, which will improve resiliency, save money, and benefit the environment. While much work remains to be done and lies ahead, the opportunities before us are incredible. The railbelt utilities are committed to working with the governor and with the legislature to develop a clean energy future. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Tony. Tony is with Matanuska.
I'm going to keep the trend going. I appreciate John's comments. Good afternoon. Been in the utility business some 40 years, and I can tell you this, that we're clearly at a pivotal moment of transition. We hear about changes in technology all the time. We hear about more renewables like solar and wind. One of the most exciting things about the governor's leadership and this order is that it's going to facilitate that change. We need a resilient, redundant, robust system that includes more transmission, more battery backup that will facilitate our ability to not only increase energy security, but resiliency for Alaskans. And affordable energy is essentially the goal, along with that safe, reliable power that we see as a generational change towards the future. We have a unique opportunity here. I can't afford to squander it. As a utility leader, I'm committed to ensure that we don't. We need to be smart, focused, work as a team. MEA stands ready to work on solutions with you, Governor, John, and others on this, and what I really believe is a generational transformation in the energy industry. Speaking of a driver of generational change, I'd like to now invite Gwen Holdman, founder of Alaska Center for Energy and Power and current Associate Vice Chancellor of Research Innovation and Industry Partnership at UAF, to the microphone. Gwen?
Thanks, Tony. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the governor and the administration for being so forward-thinking in terms of forming this this new entity, this Office of Energy Innovation. I think this is a real opportunity for the state to come together to look at a really holistic approach to energy solutions that really take advantage of that sort of all of the above strategy. And I think that's really important. We have a lot of different agencies and programs are working on very specific areas related to our energy future, and bringing those together so that there's more dialogue and interplay between these different areas that are all equally important to designing a future for our state is something that I'm really pleased to be asked to be part of. I think I can speak for the university. This is actually a newly formed role. This Associate Vice Chancellor for Innovation Industry Partnerships is really about partnering with the state and partnering with industry to figure out how the university can lend its resources and its expertise to solving some of these problems and really helping shape a path for Alaska in the future, not just for our domestic needs, but also where Alaska can play a critical role globally. I've been asked to speak a little bit about microreactors, small nuclear reactor technology. As the director of the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, the former director, this is a technology we've actually been tracking for about 12 years at the request of both the legislature and the state, working with the Alaska Energy Authority. And we've been interested in watching the evolution of this technology as it's been coming along and trying to understand what the potential applications for here in Alaska are. And this is a technology that's been on the drawing board for quite a while. I really want to make the point to my fellow Alaskans that these advanced reactor technologies are quite different from legacy nuclear technologies. I think when people think of nuclear, everyone has some sort of an immediate reaction, positive, negative, different sorts of opinions. Right now, nuclear actually does make up 20% of the energy supply in the U.S. electric power supply. That's actually more than or close to all renewables combined, including hydroelectric. So nuclear is an important part of our countries, of our national energy supply. These micro reactors are really the future of nuclear energy for the U.S. and globally. And these are advanced reactors that have really different attributes than legacy reactor technologies. They're very small. They're designed to have less nuclear material in any one place. So as you have a larger reactor, you basically just install multiples of maybe a smaller one in a small modular reactor sort of scenario. But in Alaska here, there are a lot of really early potential applications for this. And part of the reason why I'm interested in this technology is because of some of these different attributes around these newer nuclear technologies. They have really inherent and intrinsic safety features. My background is in physics and mechanical engineering, and what I'm excited about is the idea that they're basically cooled through passive physical processes that don't require active power in order to ensure that the reactor is cooled should some sort of an incident happen, for example. The actual fuel itself is packaged in ways that removes almost any potential for it coming into contamination with the environment because it's basically encased or encapsulated in very advanced materials that are abrasion and heat resistant. So there's a lot of these attributes around microreactors. They don't require water to cool. So it decouples the need to have the technology near some sort of a cooling source, some sort of a body of water, and again, reduces vectors for environmental contamination. So there's a lot of really interesting attributes of these advanced reactor technologies. I do think that Alaska has some potential applications for these, both for our rural communities that are highly dependent on diesel fuel, imported diesel fuel. A place like Nome, Alaska, for example, that the governor and I actually visited earlier, we learned that their increase in fuel price, their cost per kilowatt hour this year alone is 9 cents a kilowatt hour increase in their rate because of the cost of diesel fuel this year based on global pricing. And that is very difficult for businesses, for the Port of Nome, for other entities there, Graphite One Mine, to make long-term economic determinations about how they're going to operate, how they're going to run their businesses when you have that sort of uncertainty. And so things like microreactors, one other thing about them is that they're recycled on something like 10-year cycles, right? So you have certainty over energy pricing over that sort of timeline too. So it's a technology that I think is interesting. I would like all my fellow Alaskans to remember this is not conventional nuclear technology. And what we're doing at the University of Alaska Fairbanks at the request of the administration is to really start to design a roadmap for what deployments in Alaska could look like. The governor mentioned that the RFP for this Eielson Air Force Base small 5 megawatt microreactor came out earlier this week. That would be the first commercial reactor in the country. Right now, it's intended to be commissioned in 2027. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to achieve that, but that would be the first commercial microreactor in the country. We're expecting others to be tested at national labs, at specifically Idaho National Lab, prior to that. And we're actually bringing in a delegation of 23 Alaskans to Idaho National Lab. We're leaving this weekend to go down there for a hosted event by the lab, by the Center for Innovative Reactor Studies down at Idaho National Laboratory. And that includes Alaskans from a number of different sectors, including legislature, municipal governments, economic development groups, and Native Alaskan organizations. And also, John, you're coming. So utility representatives as well. So we're going to be going there to learn together a little bit more about the technology, the potential for Alaska, and again, start to work with the lab to develop a roadmap along with our state agencies, Department of Environmental Conservation and AEA, in order to think about what this looks like for the future of Alaska around questions that Alaskans have about the technology, which is, does it exist? Does the technology exist? If it exists, is the technology safe? If it's safe, is it economic, right? That's what John wants to know. Is this economic? And then thirdly, is it responsible? Is this an environmentally responsible thing for us to be thinking about as a state and as a country? And so those are the kinds of questions that we hope a roadmap and a process for working with communities to think about nuclear energy as part of their future. That's what we're hoping to do, working with the administration and with this new office. So thank you.
Next, is it Ike?
Governor, thank you for your leadership in convening this office, and it's part of a larger trend that your administration has shown, not just from the creation of a coordinated infrastructure office to marshal all of these significant historical amounts of federal resources, but recognizing the really great news that the preceding speakers have had, the challenges that lay before us if we do not have an articulated plan moving forward. And given the geopolitical uncertainties of the last year, emphasized by the unfortunate events that took place in the Baltic Sea that we all are aware of, as well as the concerning news out of Norway, your leadership on this and having a focal point within your office is going to be more critical than ever before. There are a lot of things that the Department of Natural Resources could talk about today, but the two most immediate ones for the benefit of the ladies and gentlemen listening at home deal, as the governor said, with both carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and how this office will help advance the critical mineral potential of our state as part of the United States' ongoing effort to onshore the industrial capacity of our national economy. Regarding carbon capture, utilization, and storage, as Mr. Rizzo has said, we are at a transformative inflection point. Carbon, which has been perceived as a liability and an environmental hazard, and in a lot of courses subjected to very punitive regulatory measures, is, through the benefit of technological advancements, being recognized as a commodity that, if stored properly and utilized in a way that it is no longer emitting, can actually progress multiple goals of lowering the emissions of an economy and producing that safe, stable, dependable energy that people in Alaska should expect when they flip on the switch, especially in the middle of a January night, or if we're asking some major industrial activity to occur in the heartland of our South Central or even our more remote regions. In a word, carbon capture, utilization, and storage is the future of the Cook Inlet. I know that's probably more of a sentence than a word, but I'm known for my run-ons, I guess, Governor. And we focus a lot on the capture, but if we can just remember that Cook Inlet is the reason for statehood. It was the discovery of oil on the Swanson River that told the members of Congress in 1957 that this state could pay its way. And those wonderful caverns that have been able to power the homes and businesses for over 60 years throughout the rail belt now have the same dependable pore space that have survived some of the most significant seismic events that the world can throw at it. And that makes it an opportune place for that carbon to be stored. And it's a monetizable opportunity for our robust oil and gas industry with our rig infrastructure. Thanks to the unique opportunities of the 45Q credits that are in our infrastructure and the Inflation Reduction Act made more permanent. And as the governor rightfully said, the utilization of carbon to be able to do enhanced oil recovery means we have the potential to find even more deposits of oil and gas, which for Ted Stevens International, which remains one of the busiest cargo hubs in the world, is going to be mission critical, not just to our commercial success, but also to the men and women of our military on Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. As Gwen rightfully pointed out, the prospect of nuclear activity, particularly micronuclear activity, is going to be instrumental to the development of the governor's mission of having Alaska be the hub for having critical minerals come online. The two greatest inhibitors to the industrial capital commitments of any project are going to be the transportation and the power. And when you look at the proliferation of what hard rock mining potential we have in the state, it is in close proximity to surface infrastructure, and it has the potential either through hydropower in Southeast or being tied in, as Fort Knox is, thankfully, as a customer of Golden Valley, being able to lower those costs. And if micronuclear reactors are going to be part of the solution, as will some of the hydropower potential that Mr. Thayer has mentioned, it will be through the Office of Energy Innovation that the governor has been able to point to as being able to marshal those opportunities together, lower the barrier to entry, and be a safe refuge for capital, which up until a year ago might have been hypothetical, but as the events of these preceding 9 months have shown, requires us to be more disciplined than ever. And it's in that futuristic output of the potential that we have for the North Slope that, with your indulgence, Governor, I'll turn it over to Mr. Frank Richards with the Alaska Gasline Development Corporation to talk about how we'll commercialize our North Slope potential.
Thank you, Ike. Thank you, Governor, for calling us here today. As a longtime engineer in this state, have been working here for about 40 years. It's really exciting to hear about these opportunities. I was a designer on the Bradley Lake project. I've been working in energy delivery for some time, and to hear this and what the opportunities are for Alaska, it's really an exciting time. The Alaska Gasline Development Corporation has the responsibility to monetize and commercialize the North Slope natural gas assets, to be able to deliver that to not only Alaskans, to hopefully lower energy costs within Alaska, but also to be able to use that abundant natural resource to be able to share and develop liquefied natural gas for sale to our Asian allies in countries along the the Asian Pacific Rim. Alaska is blessed with literally hundreds of trillions of cubic feet of natural gas on our North Slope. We have that responsibility to be able to commercialize that and bring that to bear. We have a fully permitted project. We are truly the only permitted project on the west coast of the United States. And we offer a competitive supply of LNG to our Asian markets. This project, through the carbon capture technologies that we'll utilize on the North Slope, will be delivering the lowest carbon LNG on the world market. We capture that carbon in Prudhoe Bay. We're going to sequester that carbon in Prudhoe Bay. And thanks to the 45Q tax credits that you just heard about, what was once a waste stream will now be a revenue stream, bringing in approximately $600 million a year, or about $7.2 billion over 12 years. So that is a major positive to us. The project has very strong interest from Asian buyers and investors, and we're moving forward with those private parties under agreements currently being developed. What we heard from the Asian markets is they look to LNG for the future, but they also want ammonia and hydrogen to be part of that energy transition. So they see a transition going forward, and they want to meet their net zero goals by the 2050 timeframe. One of our most compelling factors to private buyers and investors is our short and long-term ability to export low-carbon hydrogen in the form of ammonia. So you may question, how does natural gas become ammonia? It's the conversion of methane to ammonia through the capture of the carbon atoms, which can then be sequestered. Then you create a clean energy source in the form of ammonia that can be used in power generation, shipping energy, as well as other opportunities within the state of Alaska. So we see that Cook Inlet, as you've heard, has the best carbon sequestration opportunity on the Pacific North Coast. So those Asian countries are looking for LNG, ammonia, but then they also want to capture the carbon, and they're looking for some place to put that carbon. And that Cook Inlet Basin at 50 gigatons is a tremendous opportunity. That represents about 50 years of full CO2 production out of the country of Japan currently. So that's a tremendous resource that we have. We are working with companies to develop clean ammonia production in Nikiski with carbon sequestration along with the LNG production. We're responding as the state entity for the Department of Energy's Hydrogen Hub funding opportunity that just came out last week. And we're looking to provide Alaska the opportunity to be one of the hydrogen hubs for the United States and in North America. The greenhouse gas emissions that will be displaced from the sale of Alaska LNG into the Asian markets represents 77 million tons of carbon dioxide that will not be emitted because we'll be replacing coal. That's just on the LNG. Through advancements in the production of hydrogen that is used to help in energy within the Asian countries, we'll be displacing even additional carbon dioxide. So we are positioned to be one of the first major exporters of clean energy, clean ammonia in the world, and have the resource and carbon sequestration potential to transition to even larger scale blue ammonia that will help the world meet its net zero targets. Alaska LNG can provide the world low carbon LNG, but also clean ammonia in the coming decades and ultimately into the next century. So thank you, Governor, for your leadership, and we appreciate the opportunity.
I think we're open for questions now, right?
Yeah, Governor, we have some reporters on the teleconference line. We'll take our first question from Alex Bengal at KTVF in Fairbanks. Alex, your question, please.
Yes, thank you. I was hearing about the possibility for job creation from this effort. What kinds of jobs will be created by these various renewable efforts? And are there opportunities for Alaskans to be trained in these industries?
So there's already jobs being created. There's the renewables, including building dams, the wind farms, as well as the solar farms. We already have folks that are being hired, trained and hired, and put to work now. So what this will do is this will just keep growing those sectors and growing the energy sources. We're looking at transmissions, so that's going to employ a lot of folks. We're gonna do a initiative this year, and we've talked to the legislature about wiring the entire rail belt with upgraded transmission lines so that we have secure energy transmission as well as redundancy. We'll be able to unconstrain some of the energy sources, whether it's over by Valdez or down in Homer, all over the rail belt through this process. So the jobs are going to just keep growing in order to meet the demands for energy transmission, battery storage, you name it. And again, that's already happening now. How many jobs? That's the future is going to decide that. But we're pretty excited about what's happening now, and we're pretty excited about what's going to happen when things are ramped up. In terms of training, I have no doubt that we're going to be having more discussions with outfits such as the University of Alaska, which is already discussing how they're going to go about training folks in these new technologies, as well as other training entities that will also incorporate these new technologies into their training schedule. So, again, it's happening now.
Okay, and our next question, let's go to Alex DeMarban at the Anchorage Daily News. Alex?
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me and holding this conference. I'd like to ask why this is being done now. Is it the Cook Inlet gas supply concerns? Is it the large influx of federal support? Is it election season timing? Just kind of wondering what's kind of driving the creation of this now, say, as opposed to 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. This has been in process for some time. And what we've had now is a number of bills that were passed in Congress, as well as private sector opportunities to capitalize on the different energy sources that Alaska has. The technology is rapidly advancing. And again, this discussion has been going on for some time. If you remember, we had a sustainable energy conference in May. That was planned for the past year. We've been having discussions probably for the past 2.5 years on the routes to take, the methods to take to capitalize on Alaska's energy possibilities. So geothermal is being worked on. We've got a geothermal play, for example, out in the Aleutians. The tidal issues in Cook Inlet have been discussed for some time, but the technologies are advancing there as well. We already know what our hydro possibilities are. Wind solar advances have have increased dramatically in recent years. And the small nuclear reactor concept, that's just, the conversations are just beginning there. So all of this is coming together today so that we can capitalize on some of the bills that have been passed once again, some of the private sector opportunities that we believe are out there, but also getting Alaska prepared, not just for tomorrow or the next day, but for the next 50 years. So it's been in the making for some time. It's just coming to fruition today, this office. This is just the beginning.
Okay, we'll go to the room for a question before taking the last question on the teleconference line. Kim Danke with Alaska's News Source.
Yes, Governor. Will this new office be replacing or taking over the work of any existing state agencies?
No, this office, that's a great question. So no, this office is going to coalesce around policies developed in the governor's office with input from a lot of stakeholders. You see some of the stakeholders here today. But the idea is to have a clearinghouse for ideas, have a clearinghouse for policies so that we can turn those policies into action. So we'll be working with everyone behind us. We'll be working with AEA, ADA, all of the different utilities throughout the state of Alaska, all of the different sources of energy that we can harness here in the state of Alaska. There'll be conversations with mining concerns on the types of minerals that we'll need. So it's really going to be a broad approach to energizing Alaska for the next 50 years using new technologies. But it's not going to displace anyone. It's just going to bring policies together so we have a coherent approach to developing policies and then implementing those policies.
Okay. And back to the teleconference line. Our last question comes from Jack Barnwell with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Okay. I guess that's it, sir.
Is that it? Well, again, I want to thank you all for being here today. This, what's happening here in Alaska is pretty exciting when it comes to energy. We've always known we were an energy giant. For decades, we've focused mainly on energy sources such as oil, coal, gas, but those energy sources have a tremendous life ahead of them as well. What's happened, though, is the technology has advanced greatly when it comes to things like solar, wind, geothermal, and nuclear energy. And so I think Alaska's in a position today to capitalize on these new technologies, to capitalize on some of the opportunities that have been created by some of these bills that were passed, as well as private sector investment. And again, what was discussed with regard to carbon is now a commodity to be monetized. So all this is coming together today. I think it's a great opportunity for Alaska. We're going to capitalize on it. And the goal is going to be lower cost for Alaskans in terms of electricity, sustainable electricity, as well as electricity we can rely on where we don't have to rely on outside sources to determine Alaska's future. So you're going to be hearing some great news here in the next few months, next few weeks regarding some of these initiatives. And I just want to thank everyone that's here today because it's going to be a great opportunity. So get ready, Alaska. There's going to be a lot going on here over the next few months. So thank you. Thanks, guys.